Now, we recognize some of our dignitaries. Dr. Ronke Samuel, please.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's still the 50th anniversary of the alumni of University of Lagos. Great Akokites. We can do better now. Greatest of the greatest Akokites. I can hear the response in front, and you know that all our old alumni are in front. Let them resound from the back. Greatest Bagba. Greatest Bogbo, greatest of the greatest and the greatest alumni, and the greatest University of Lagos students. It's our pleasure to have you in our midst, at least to see the future of where you are headed for. And you will agree with me that it's a pleasure to be a student in this university. Do you agree or you don't agree? Then let's give University of Lagos a better round of applause now. Thank you. We heard those who said it was unfortunate for them that they didn't pass through this place. But you know, in our usual good way, we have told them, University of Lagos Business School, for the executives, so they can come. The doors are open wide. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure this evening to tell us that in the house, we have Olori Ogunsoni Kuku, immediate past president of University of Lagos Alumni. You're welcome, sir. Also with us this evening, Professor Olaide Abbas. Please, a round of applause. There is a distinguished professor of our university, also in our midst, distinguished Professor Babaji Diallo. A round of applause for him too. Immediate past registrar, JUPEB, Professor Ache Yalemi. Please give him a round of applause. All right. Okay. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am a woman under instruction, and I've been instructed to tell us, because now we are live on channels, we would have to restrict movements, so that when they are looking at you at home, they will not say, oh, you know. So let's just pause for people at home to see us very well. Representing University of Lagos Bosa is Mrs. Shitu. Please let's give her a round of applause. Thank you very much, ma'am, for coming. And so, we will start the lecture. The guest lecturer is in our midst already. And it is a lecture to commemorate the 50th anniversary of University of Lagos Alumni. And the guest lecturer is no other person than Dr. Kande Yumkela. Sir, I want to crave your indulgence to please be upstanding. Please let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Dr. Kande Yumkela is the immediate past Director General, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, former United Nations Under Secretary General, and the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All. He's a former UN Under Secretary General, Chair of UN Energy 2008 to 2015, and the founding CEO and Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sustainable Energy for All. He is a distinguished development economist and an expert in agricultural economics with over 25 years of international experience. He brought a renewed and vital focus to global energy issues and led the coordination of the United Nations response to energy issues. Prior to joining the UN, he was Minister for Trade, Industry and State Enterprises for Sierra Leone and an assistant professor at Michigan State University. A member of preeminent global organizations and the recipient of numerous international awards. He holds a BSc in General Agriculture from Njala University College, Sierra Leone, MSc in Agricultural Economics, Cornell University, and a PhD in Agricultural Economics, University of Illinois. Previously, he served as Director General of United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and he did that for 2 4-year terms, spanning between the year 2005 and 2013. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this evening, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Alumni, University of Lagos, I am proud to introduce to us today's guest lecturer, Dr. Kante Yumkela. Please, a round of applause for him.
Thank you very much, faculty and staff of the University of Lagos, alumni, students, friends of the University of Lagos, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols are duly observed. It is an honor for me to be here on your during the celebration of your 50th anniversary. It is a great privilege for me to be asked to share some ideas with you. I am particularly happy to be here to see old friends, Professor Alo. I used to visit him here, getting his ideas on sustainable development and environmental issues. And I saw a very old friend of mine, long time ago, haven't seen him almost 2 decades, General Bajowa. I met General Bajowa my first 5 months in the UN. I was very green and I had to deal with a big minister like him. An honor to see you again, sir. But I'm also pleased to see Bismarck. When I was back here 2000 to 2003, he used to organize breakfast briefings on the economy at the Lagos Business School. And a number of us diplomats will go there for 1 hour to understand what was really happening in the Nigerian economy. So Bismarck, it's great to see you here and to see many others this evening. Wahid called me just a couple of months ago and said I should be here. And when Wahid calls, some of us say yes. I panicked a little bit. I said, Wahid, you should have given me 6 months to prepare. He said, no, come to Nigeria. We know you like coming here. It's your home. And I have siblings here, and my daughter is married here as well. So I have good reasons to come here. But there's another reason. Nigeria always influences what I do next. When I was a young minister, I came here and I couldn't understand how a great country like this with oil and gas would be running short of electricity and petrol sometimes and the accused. You know, so you will not be surprised that, of course, 10 years later, I was leading global issues on energy. I came here also as a young diplomat, 2000 to 2003, during the President Obasanjo administration when they were privatizing digital mobile and meeting folks like Bismarck. 3 years later, I went back to that organization and said, I'm good enough to be CEO and head of this organization. So that's what Nigeria does for me. It inspires me, and hopefully tonight you'll inspire me to do something else with my life. I spent almost 2 decades in the UN, and since I left 4 years ago, I have still been engaging with them and the World Bank and other institutions. But you'll be surprised, 2 decades out, almost 30 years out of my country, Sierra Leone. I did a stint there as minister, resigned, ran back to academia. Professor Alo, I had to come back. The kitchen was too hot in politics. Then I did a crazy thing 5 years ago. I decided to go back home and decided to run for president. Oh my God, leaving academia, the comforts of the UN and structured environments, I went back into the trenches of African politics. And this evening I arrive and Wahid puts me between 2 former deputy governors. I say, Wahid, what are you trying to tell me? Well, to cut a long story short, I did a number of good things around the world, but when I ran for president, I lost badly. So when I listen to the artists telling you, you try, you fail, try again, I say, are they talking about me here? Yeah, but one of them said, sometimes it's just not your time. And you should be ready to accept when it is not your time. In Africa, some leaders and so on don't accept when they lose. Sometimes you got to accept that I lost, Maybe it was in time, or maybe I didn't do the right thing, and maybe you decide later if you're going to try again. I am here to talk to you about sustainable development, how Nigeria could achieve the sustainable development goals. Many of you are experts in Nigeria, so I would not even attempt to believe that I'll tell you how to do it, but at least I'll share a few ideas with you about how you might attain not only the sustainable development goals, but transform your country for yourselves and for the rest of Africa. Whenever you talk about Nigeria transforming, you're really talking about Africa changing. This is the heart of Africa. Nigeria is the heart of Africa. So what are the sustainable development goals? First slide. Many of you know these already, 17 goals, 169 targets. Each goal has 3 or 4 targets, some cases 5, and about 244 indicators. I was fortunate in my career that I was there at that time defining what we call the 2030 agenda for the world. So it was a big privilege for me because I was front row and I was in charge of doing some of that. I served on the ad hoc committee for Rio Plus 20 Sustainable Development Conference in Rio that started defining the Sustainable Development Goals. Before then, we had the Millennium Development Goals. Some people ask me, what's the difference? Why these? The Millennium Development Goals, 8 of them that we adopted during the era of Secretary General Kofi Annan, were in essence a compact between the rich north and the south to say, let's help the poor countries. That was the fundamental thrust. The SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, are a little different. They're more inclusive and more comprehensive because we found out as we were implementing the Millennium Development Goals and at the same time as a totally side event doing negotiations on sustainability, we found out in fact, yes, people were helping poor countries elevate themselves from poverty, but the rich countries themselves were doing something else that was impacting the whole world. They were not taking care of ecosystems. They were emitting greenhouse gases that were affecting us. In fact, if climate change continues on the current trajectory, Africans pay the highest price. We contribute only about 3% to greenhouse gases, less than 3% to greenhouse gases, but if you look at all the worst case scenarios, we will suffer the most. So we realize that, look, you can't talk about development and growth separately from environmental issues. And if we have to save the planet, we poor countries will have to play our part as we lift ourselves out of poverty. But the rich countries also have to change how they use resources, natural resources, ecosystems, because a lot of those also come from our neighborhood. You know, today everybody wants a piece of the real estate of Africa. You young people, everybody's trying to make a deal with Africans because we happen to sit on huge quantities of resources that are needed to make other people rich. I hope we become rich in the process. So that's why we define so many goals, 17. But we also said we want to measure them. So we had to define targets to help countries set their own national targets. In addition, 244 indicators. How do we measure progress? They say in management, Bismarck and others know, if you don't measure it, you don't care about it. And your staff will know that you don't care about it. So these are the 7, but you look at the first 5, they're the same as the Millennium Development Goals because we had not achieved them yet. So after 2015, when we adopted these, we said, okay, we have unfinished business. A significant part of the world is still poor. And then we have to do the rest. Next slide. You will see this when you Google Sustainable Development Goals. That's the typical logo for the SDGs. And thank you very much from the presidency, Madam, for giving me one of the badges too. There's a reason why I use this one. You see, I put Ministry of Energy in the middle. I spent a long time now working on global energy issues and advocating for energy access in Africa. And I have no doubt, and I'll spend quite a bit of time on that, that energy is the ultimate enabler. Without energy in the 21st century, you remain poor. You remain poor and destitute. Next slide. So I spent time building SDG 7. I was given the privilege and honor by the Secretary General to lead that coalition for the world, mobilizing and convincing people that energy has to be a central part of the next development agenda for the world. You might ask, but that's obvious. It is obvious, but in diplomacy, it's politics. You think energy is important, the other person tells healthcare. Somebody says it's education, or they say it's food security. Of course, we had to build a political narrative to say none of that will happen without affordable, reliable access to energy. And what shaped that in my head was my country, Sierra Leone, but particularly Nigeria. I spent 3 years here, 2000 to 2003. I was living here in Ikoyi, close to Lugard. You know Lugard now. Yeah? One of the most posh places in Lagos. I see it's all transformed now, high-rise buildings. But I lived there. But I had my own generator. I bought water by tanker, sometimes panicking when the levels are low. That's a contradiction. I visited factories. Yes, I used to live here, drive to Aba and Newi, sometimes flying to Port Harcourt and go up. Yeah. Onitsha. I used to go to the markets. Kano, Kaduna, visiting the factories. Being with the titans of business. I did a lot of work with the Manufacturers Association. How can this country, swimming in oil and gas, not guarantee affordable, reliable energy? That was unacceptable. So when I had the opportunity to be Director General of UNIDO, an industrial agency, I had done a number of studies here, I'd been around factories, big businesses, or the NESG. I used to be a central friend of the NESG. Immediately I took my oath of office, same day in my speech, I said I'll lead energy issues. So I took up a second job, literally, for the sake of Africa. If Nigeria was struggling with energy access, if their factories, each one of them had to have a generator, can you imagine what happens in other countries that did not have those resources? Second, SDG 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization and foster innovation. I laid the foundation up for that because I was Director General for 8 years, going to Asia, visiting factories in Bangladesh, in India, China. Some of those places I just repeatedly went there. Korea, Malaysia, they're talking about green growth, innovation. And I come back to Africa and say, oh my God, we are way behind, sometimes 2-3 decades behind. These guys are already first world, some of them second world, but they were innovating and thinking ahead what happens in the world 30-40 years. And I said, and we are not even talking about it. But of course you had people like Professor Alo and others, and we started organizing conferences on sustainability and industrialization. Now I talked about 17 goals. The president of the African Development Bank, your own Nigerian citizen, interestingly, both of us have a PhD in agricultural economics. He was in Iowa and Purdue, I was in Illinois. He took the 17 goals and said, okay, which ones are critical for Africa? And he developed what he called the high fives. Feed Africa, light up and power Africa, integrate Africa, industrialize Africa, improve the quality of life of the African people. He picked 5. And I quote him directly what he says. He says, and I quote, I firmly believe that if Africa focuses on these high fives, the continent will achieve 90% of its SDGs and 90% of its Agenda 2063 goals. Agenda 2063 is the vision of the African Union, of where Africa wants to be. Yeah? And then he continues, it is why industrialization and industrializing Africa is at the heart of the African Development Bank's 5 SDGs. He picked those 5. He says 17 are important, but I picked these 5. If our leadership in Africa can drive those, then you, the next generation, you have hope. Perhaps you can even capture the 21st century. Those are the ones he chose. But if you look at what he says, improve the quality of life of Africans, that's loaded, right? Improving the quality of life for Africans, you can look at it, has almost 5 or 6 SDGs built in. It means good education. They have to have food on their plates. They have to be healthy. Security. They need liberty and justice to prevail, and good governance. And light, of course. So the last one is really loaded, but he picked 5. And in the middle of those 2, light up and power Africa and industrialize Africa. So the question is, where does Nigeria stand now? Next slide. On those, of course, I can't cover 17, and I'm sure Excellency from the presidency is here and other experts that will elaborate on all. So I went back to the UN reports from Nigeria, and I picked a few. Yeah, I picked a few to see, so that you read what they say where you are. SDG 1, we say no to poverty. It says here, Nigeria was ranked 157th out of 188 countries in the 2018 Human Development Index. Nationally, 46% of the population lives below the poverty line, while in the Northeast, it is 77%. You decide if you're doing well or not, yeah? I just give you what the assessments are. The second one, we want to end hunger. We don't want any Nigerian going to bed hungry. You're a rich country. How many billionaires do you have? 30? So you're very rich. And they also, you see their philanthropy is very good, and they're trying to innovate. Many millionaires here. They want your life to be better, but they don't want anybody hungry. So, zero hunger. Where do we stand? Access to food. The first target there is 2.1. Nearly 13 million Nigerians are still affected by hunger, with wide disparity across the geopolitical zones between urban and rural areas. More than 40% of children aged 0 to 59 months are chronically malnourished, stunted, 11% are acutely malnourished, and 32% are underweight. Health. Nigeria has the second largest HIV epidemic. You've done well on driving malaria and others, but these are problems that still exist. HIV, the highest number of pediatric cases in the world, and 51% of HIV burden. Over 40% of children, I mentioned that already, between 0 and 59 months are malnourished. Quality of education. Here you've done pretty well. You have a lot of schools, but these are still some challenges left. 10 million school-age children. 60% of them girls are out of school. 70% of males aged over 6 have attended school at some point, compared to 58% of females. There's still a problem of girls in schools. Gender equality. Very great to see the women on the stage earlier. Still challenges with gender. Of course, on climate, you know, up north, that there is serious desertification. It's advancing. Back in 2016, I did a few missions up there. Could see the lack of trees and the dryness. But let me pick my favorite ones, because those are the ones I was involved in, and those are the ones that Nigeria helped to influence me to try to push for the rest of Africa. SDG 7, next slide. Access to affordable, reliable energy. We take energy for granted, but without energy, you can't pump water. Without energy, you can't run the hospitals. Many doctors in the room know that without reliable power in the hospitals, you can't do x-rays, CAT scans, you name it, advanced surgery. High maternal mortality rates in Africa, partly due to lack of energy in hospitals. The woman is bleeding when she delivers a baby. They don't have a blood bank, so they call people from the street to give blood. It happens in parts of Nigeria, but it happens a lot in my country and other poorer countries. So energy is central for agriculture, irrigation, mechanization, processing of foods. How many people know how to make gari in this room? I used to do projects here in Ibadan with IIT and others. I remember I was part of President Obasanjo's Saturday retreat, looking at how we can commercialize cassava in those days, how you process it. You need power, you need an energy source. But we said we want to have universal access to energy. Target number 1 by 2030. Is Nigeria approaching it? These are your stats from Power Africa. Installed capacity, 12,500 and something megawatts. You see the distribution between thermal and hydro. Well, if about 2,000 megawatts are coming from hydro, watch out with climate change. Those river levels, dam levels will go down. But look at the connection rates. About half of your population still lives without access to electricity. That's unacceptable, not in Nigeria. What you deliver, yes, installed capacity about 12,000 megawatts, but what you deliver at any one time is between 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. Bismarck, maybe it's higher, you'll correct me later, but I'm in panels with Nigerians, so I know. Even last month we were together in Italy, some of your utility managers. You know why it's ridiculous? I was here 2000 to 2003 when we were told that 3,000 megawatts will be built. Every government that I know of Nigeria has set a huge target. You're still at the 3,000. It is almost as if Nigeria runs fast to stay in the same place. You're on a treadmill. But I was here in those meetings, and I've been coming here since then. We put these targets, but you're still at about 4,000. Ghana is at 85% electrification. We were there 2 months ago with the World Bank, everybody, making the case how we drive Ghana to achieve the remaining 15%. Incentives required, public policy, the skills required. I said, oh my God, I left Nigeria almost 18 years ago, and they're still not there. Ghana is going there now. But I'll make you angry as I go on. The per capita consumption of electricity here is about 144 kilowatt hour per person. In North America, it's almost 4,000. You see the gap between us and them? In Europe, it's about 3,000. Asia, 2,000, 3,000. You at 144. The energy mecca of Africa, you're at 144. That is if you have it. Half of you don't have it. Well, I'm sure the students know the Bob Marley theme, in the abundance of water. You finish it for me. Only the fool is thirsty. If you have so much oil and gas that you ship around the world, how can 50% of your population not have energy? Tell me. Is it rocket science? No, it can be done. But that's where you are. You have the natural resources, but you don't have the results. We move on. Next slide. Industrialization. Yeah, in those big debates at Lagos Business School, Patotomi and others, copy the Asian model. At one time, I took some Nigerian officials to Malaysia. I organized a visit. I took the Minister of Industry, Special Advisor to the President on SMEs, the Minister of Science and Technology, President Manufacturers Association, and Pat Otomi from Lagos Business School. I just wanted them to see one thing, not 50, how they industrialized oil palm. That's all. And the institutions they built, how science and research and technology and management industrialized oil palm, and they got a lot of the germplasm from you and other West African countries. Of course, then we had to talk about cassava too. The #1 producer of cassava in the world for 3 decades is Nigeria. But you eat 70–80% of it raw. So I was trying to do another arrangement between Nigeria and Thailand. Thailand processes 80–90% of its cassava into about 7–8 products. Oil palm, the Malaysians make about 30 products. Our great Nigeria, #1 producer of cassava, we they eat gari eba no more. Yes. Yes. Maybe now it's different. Maybe now it's different. But Bismarck, it's still the same. 2000 to 2003, we did all these forums here. We sent people out to the rest of the world to learn how to industrialize cassava. We were looking at technologies. What was the aim here at that time? The government said, can we substitute cassava flour for wheat that is imported here? How can we introduce it in the lunch packs of kids? Industrializing it, adding services. Maybe it's done already, 20 years later. All right, if you answer no, then you have to do it. But these are your stats. Manufacturing is just 8% of your GDP. You can see the other stats. Capacity utilization, I used to hear this a lot in MAN, still very low, 57%. Infrastructure, they give you comparisons there. You have 1/7 the paved roads compared to what India has, and 1/5 of the energy installed capacity that India has. So, see, this is when I like my mic, but they told me I can't have a moving mic. But okay, I'll just stay here then.
Hello, you can use this.
I can use yours.
Yeah.
So I want to transition. I gave you the stats of what the technical people say where you are on the SDGs. Question is, how do we move forward? What can we do? And I will not only talk about Nigeria, I'll talk about Africa as well. Why would I do that? If Nigeria transforms, becomes an economic power, the rest of West Africa rises. I believe that. Already in your state where you are, you help the rest of us. A lot of the products we get are from you. But you can do much more. I liked what the last panel said. Your biggest export today are your films. Yeah, you cause problems for some of us because when it's bedtime, the ladies are still watching Nigerian movies. But you're reaching out. So imagine an industrial, modern Nigeria, 200 million people, that is projected to be about 400 million by 2050. 400 million of you. Very soon, our kids will be talking 500 million. If you transform, it's for the rest of Africa. So some of what I will say now, I'll switch between Nigeria and Sub-Saharan Africa. In my view, if you want to move the Sustainable Development Goals, transform your economy and your nation, we have to manage 5 transitions. Next slide. The transition number 1, and I call them transitions because they are moving, they're dynamic. Demographics. It can be an opportunity for you, or it will be your worst nightmare. Some estimate you're what now? 190 million, some say 198. Okay, let's round it 200 million. But the projection is that will double by 2050. 2050 is just around the corner. I'll have my walking stick then, yes. But you sitting in the audience, you young folks, you'll be my age. That is an opportunity, the biggest market opportunity you can think of. Because even with the current population, you have about 40 million of you that are almost lower middle class and some upper middle class. Imagine 400 million Nigerians. And I say this is a transition because your planners like Bismarck and others, your leadership, should not be looking at the 200 million. They should be thinking like the Koreans do. What happens in 25 years when we are 400 million? What are the technologies? How do we feed ourselves? How do we become a powerhouse and become an industrial power, and people will reckon with Nigeria? Demographic transition. If you manage it well with the skills, you become the manufacturing hub for the rest of the world, like Vietnam is, like India is today. Who says you cannot be with that amount of population, 50% of whom will be below 30? The second transition, trade and industrialization. In Africa, 70% or more of our exports are still raw materials. In a lecture I gave here in the Leadership Forum, I think about 1.5 years ago, I said we suffer from the Garden of Eden syndrome. Garden of Eden syndrome. If it is true that we are truly, Africa is the Garden of Eden, God gave us everything. Cocoa, coffee, good weather. And of course they gave our Nigerian brothers and sisters a lot of oil and gas. But in the Garden of Eden, you just pick it up and eat it, right? You don't process it. That's the way you also treat your oil. 85% of your exports are oil. I thought you would tell me that you're exporting plastics, biodegradable plastics. I thought you would tell us that, oh, you're a big petrochemical power, like Malaysia, but you're not. And they don't have half the oil and gas you have. They don't have it. The Garden of Eden syndrome means we're just picking, consuming, or shipping out. No value addition.
That has to change. So industrialization is crucial. It's a transition. You can get there. You'll see later on some other numbers. Energy transition. I've talked about energy. You have what everybody in the 21st century are fighting for, energy security. I'm in a lot of those forums. Yeah. Just did one with MIT in New York last month. Another one in Bellagio. I'm in a lot of those forums for the last 20 years. Everybody wants what you have. You have it and you're not capitalizing on it. And in fact, you have deficit. Over half your people do not have it. That has to change. Build climate resilience. As I said, whether we are emitting greenhouse gases or not, we will pay the heaviest price. You, the students, go research. Go see what I mean. Go look at the numbers. Disease prevalence, desertification, extreme weather events. Africa will suffer the most. And of course, if you are poor, you would not have resilience because you don't have alternatives. You stay where you are when the flood comes, you move and then you come back. And it's repeating. Desertification means you keep running down, or you still keep having problems in the plateau. Herders and farmers. That problem started a few years before I came here, still exists. Number 5. Leadership matters. These things don't happen by accident. Visionary leadership across the world, across the board here. Political, corporate, academics, innovation systems. You need leadership. I have lived in Europe for some time and the US. I have been in the highest level forums you can think about. I see heads of states setting targets and coming back every year reporting how they achieve it. Yes, I spent a little bit of time with Secretary Chu, who was the energy secretary for the US, in different meetings, and Secretary Moniz. I saw them set targets on transforming the American energy sector, and they check. Leadership matters. Visionary leadership, determined to make the hard choices to get transformation. Transformation takes time. Next slide. So given those, look at our lack of relevance in global economy. Yeah? Our share of global manufacturing value added, about 2% for the whole of Africa. If we are 2% for the whole of Africa, where is Nigeria? Asia Pacific, 34%. Latin America, 5%. The industrialized world, 55%. That's where the money is, when you add value. If you ship your oil, you buy end products from other people. They make more money, you make less. Because you're treating oil like the Garden of Eden, for God's sake. Add value. Have your refineries work. Average share of MVA in GDP. Look at us, 10%. Nigeria is about 8.7%. In Asia, 25%. Latin America, 12%. People tell me, oh, but Africa can leapfrog and go to services. I agree. That's why I like the last panel about the creative industries. But let me tell you where the African service sector is. Informal sector. It's a crisis. Look at some of the reports from ILO and UNECA. Our service sector is not what the others have. They're in the informal sector. Then they sell small on tray. That's where the bulk of them are. Illiterate, semi-illiterate, unskilled. That's not where we want to be. When they talk about us leapfrogging into the service sector, it means digital, high-tech, financial services, not informal sector. Next slide. Energy transition, I mentioned this already, so I'll not spend more time. But one thing I want to say, the opportunities. 30% of the oil and gas discoveries over the last 8 years or so were in Africa. Places like Mauritania, Chad, my country, Ghana. Of course, you have a lot of it. It begs the question, what will we do with it? Tanzania, Senegal just discovered huge oil and gas deposits. Will they learn from the Asians and do better? Or will they be like Nigeria? Who knows? Don't feel bad if I'm talking harshly. I'm not talking for I'm not talking for myself or the old folks here. I'm deliberately trying to make you, the youth, angry. When you're angry, insecure, then you want to change. If you sit in your comfort zone, you will be poorer than us, because there will be 400 million of you. We are gone. We've had the best times. We have had the best times in Africa. When some of us went to school here and we ended up in the States or London, they asked us whether we were trained in Oxford. Because that's how good academics was here. I wanted to study here in Nigeria. I even did an internship here in research. My brother studied here too. That's why I want you, the youth, to be angry and passionate. If you don't have fire in your belly, you will be poorer than us. Yeah. If you don't engage in having the leadership that will transform your country, you will be worse off than us. So I see some of these youth only wanting to listen to music. Politics is not my business. Okay, sit down for corner. Somebody else will do the politics. You hear what Professor Lumumba says, right? Those with ideas are not leading. Those without ideas will lead you. That's why you must engage as youth. Because it's about your destiny, your future. Next slide. Next slide. Energy. This is reality. I asked a friend of mine to send me some pictures from Nigeria. Unfortunately, the panel cannot see them. Open fires. Kids studying with that lamp. It's causing a lot of premature deaths for them. But that also happens in my country. You know the night markets, right? Aha. That's real. Next one. I try to humanize the energy story. That other picture is personal to me. That's from my village. I took that picture with my iPhone. A woman at 3 p.m. in the afternoon carrying firewood. She's pregnant too. She had 2 kids behind her. That's life in my village, and I tell you it's happening to maybe 100 million Nigerians too. Lagosians, you say we different, but you use charcoal here too. Yes, I know. I see the trucks coming in from Ibadan. But you know why this is sad? In a lot of rural communities, the women become the energy. She's carrying firewood to go and cook. If she gets home and there's no water, she'll go fetch water too, and then she will cook for the husband. And of course, we leave that one there. Next slide. That's a woman cooking. The picture is blurred. Not because it's not focused, because of the smoke. And the children, the young kids are around her. This is one of the things I'm leading now globally. Clean cooking solutions. And I try to lobby here a lot for LPG, which you have. But I'll talk about that very soon. Next slide. This is my favorite picture. Maybe Bismarck knows this. It's from about 8 years ago. Gas flaring in the Niger Delta. This I picked from an American magazine. The kids are playing soccer at night under the flaring. But look all around them, it's dark. Well, let me tell you, here in this country in 2001, I organized a conference in Abuja on ending gas flaring. Because at that time in 2001, the government was trying to put a target 2012 to end gas flaring, right? And some folks were lobbying against it. So I did a conference, President Obasanjo cleared it. As a UN officer, we brought in experts. You're still flaring. This is a recent statement a couple of months ago from your head for dealing with gas flaring. He says, not me, Nigeria could save $1 billion annually by ending gas flaring. But they can create 300,000 jobs, 600,000 metric ton of LPG, and probably 2.5 gigawatts of power. You've been flaring gas since Kingdom Come. It's not rocket science. I have been on the most sophisticated oil platform in the North Sea. Yeah? The Slipner platform. I've been there. They only flare for technical reasons. That technology has been known for 30 years. Why do you still flare here? And then you live in darkness. You, the young engineers, you tell me. Of course, it's also about economics, pricing, infrastructure. You cannot be burning billions of dollars, or instead of using it to make LPG to save your families, and you're burning it. So fast forward, let me come to my conclusions. I think I've laid the foundation enough to make sure Unilag students become the next innovators to lift Nigeria up. So, go back. This is where I want to end my last 3 slides. There are opportunities. It's not all doom and gloom. The opportunities you have in Nigeria, even some European countries will want it. You are the 26th largest economy in the world, about $500 billion, right, GDP. McKinsey projects that it could be 1.6 trillion by 2030 if you grow at over 7%. Yeah, you could be 1.6 trillion. But to do that, you need to grow fast. Good public policy, infrastructure, financial intermediation, skills. You need all of those SDG elements, infrastructure, to be able to reach it. Another investment of about $1.5 billion of investment can move some of your sectors if those are committed. And you need an energy revolution. Yeah? They estimate that you could have 160 million households here that have real purchasing power. That's a huge market. Those are the opportunities that you see. That's why you have Woolworth here. That's why you have ShopRite. They know Nigeria has young, dynamic people who are purchasing now. Take advantage of that retail market. Next slide. I came up with this idea when I was invited 2012 to the Investment Forum of Nigeria in London. It's part of the Olympics. I think the whole of Nigeria came there. I was the last speaker. I didn't have much to say, but I remembered my days in Nigeria. So this is something I want to preach here as well. I see Nigeria having a golden triangle. Bismarck, you got to see this because I want you to critique it. It takes vision to say this. It has the following poles. You have Kano in the north, Lagos, Ogun in the west, Port Harcourt in the south, Calabar in the east. I call it the golden triangle. Because as a young minister, I went to Korea. I was a young minister 1994 to 1995 to learn about how they industrialize. And what one general did for them was not an economist, not a PhD, a general. They showed us a highway from the north to the south, a visionary. Why did he do it? He had visited Germany looking for aid. And according to the professor who was then his economic advisor, who later on, an old man, was our lecturer, he said, I was a young economic advisor to him. After 3 days of visit on the Autobahn, he stopped the vehicle. He came down. He said, how come we don't have a highway like this in Korea? The guy said, we can't afford it. He said, what do you mean we can't afford it? You know, we economists, what we do. He starts explaining. The general just went back to the vehicle. He told us the story that 3 months later, when they returned, the general called him back. He was standing in front of the map. And he said, come here. You remember the highway in Germany we saw? He said, yes, sir. I want it for Korea. He said, let me tell you exactly where it will be. From the north here to the south. Yes, sir. But we don't have the money. He said, that's your job. You go back now with finance and tell me how I pay for it. Short story. Within 4 years, they built it. Now, 20 years later, when we visited, they said, let's tell you what vision can do. This one highway has become a major trunk in Korea. And around it, just like that triangle, they have triangles. That highway created clusters. Their IT cluster, their ship making in the south, and so on. And the guy said, because of one man's vision. For me, this is what I see in Nigeria. Industrial clusters and hubs. Lagos, manufacturing, SME, tech hub. Yaba is already a tech hub. I read about it. Everybody wants to invest here now. You have young, dynamic people. Give them good education, good skills. Your youth corps service, let it become a tech corps service. Give them the skills so they become the next IT guys. Port Harcourt. That cluster, when I say Port Harcourt, you see the circles. I'm talking about a catchment area. Akwa Ibom, Port Harcourt, Cross River, all those who have oil and gas. Those governors should get together. How do they become the petrochemical hub of Nigeria? Not individual agendas. I used to come to is it NDDC? 2 years ago, they were going to invite me as keynote speaker. But everybody's doing his or her own show. Let me tell you, that gas that is flared, you can generate power from the south, send it up north. Transmission lines. That's what I see in Europe. That's what I preach now. Energy trading. Petrochemical, oil and gas, and they can power this economy if the connections are there. Calabar. Now, of course, up north, renewable energy. God gave you so much sun. You can be a powerhouse in renewables. So what are those lines? The red one is power. You need the interconnections, that infrastructure that takes power from one side, sends it to the other side. That's what they do in Europe. I lived in Central Europe for 17 years. They trade energy. The yellow one is gas. You have to pipe that gas to the rest of Nigeria. Pipe it so they can power their own industries too. The blue one is rail. I don't know why you don't have efficient rail here. I know people, how can you have industries in northern Nigeria if they have to truck the inputs? You don't have to be a rocket scientist. India is creating their own industrial corridor. Delhi to Mumbai corridor. They're doing all of this. You link these nodes with infrastructure. Interconnection in power transmission and distribution. Roads, highways, but rail. You need rail. And of course, if you do that, you can crisscross the lines. Benue, Abuja, those are big agribusiness and tech-hub potential. So this is what Bismarck, I call my own golden triangle for Nigeria. It can be done. It can be done. Next slide. Next slide. So, conclusions. Nigeria can drive the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it shouldn't stop there. It's about making Nigeria a powerhouse. By 2050, 400 million Nigerians. I'm sure if the men are active enough, it will be 500 million Nigerians. But that's 27 years from now. What do you want to do with that population? So for me, I identified 3 drivers. Number 1, sustained, deliberate. I chose my words very carefully. Sustained, deliberate, and targeted public investment in growth hubs and industrial corridors. Why do I say sustained? It's not a quick fix. Our politicians, I refuse to do that in my campaign. Our politicians tell you, immediately I get elected, you'll get electricity. Na lie. Na lie. If they understand electrical system, they know say, na lie. Oh, I'll pave these 700 kilometers in 2 years. Na lie. It is sustained. It's 10 to 20 years to transform. It is deliberate. You got to make choices. Nigerians have to get together and say, we want to build those hubs, those clusters. We want to do that interconnection, which means you forgo something. All I ask, like the Koreans have done, 10% of your GDP every year for 10 years, and you leverage private capital. 10%, that's about what? 5 billion a year? But you can leverage 3-4 times that if you know how to do financing like the people in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. You put $1 billion, you raise 3 billion. Second driver, catalyze a domestic energy revolution as an enabler. Third driver, invest in knowledge and skills. Revamp your youth core to become a tech core or an entrepreneurship core with business skills. Those 3 drivers, I say you impose on 6 sectors. Next slide. That's where I'll end. Catalyze growth in the tech hubs. You already have tech hubs emerging. You got to work with them. Around 2011, I went to Korea. We were discussing green growth. And the new Korean president, who used to be a CEO in the industry, said he wants Korea to be the leader in green energy technologies and green growth. And he says, I'm preparing Korea for the next 20 years. He did exactly what the others had done 30, 40 years before him. He committed 10% of his GDP. Why? He said, that's where the world will be in 30, 40 years. I want to prepare Korea. Everything they did, institutions for research, universities, they mapped out what skills they will need. Financing in banks to encourage their private sector to invest in innovation. They had business incubators. Everything. You sit there to say, wow, I used to read about this in grad school. The man is doing it real time. Google green growth in Korea and you will see where they are today. Trying to be number 1 in battery production. Battery production and other new technologies for green growth. That's the way you got to do it in Nigeria. Catalyze these tech hubs. Encourage the creative industry. You heard a lot about it just now. Capitalize on the consumer demand. Nigerians like fine clothes, right? You like for look chic. Not so? Indomie proved that you also like good food. Well, if you have 40 million of you now, and maybe 150 million of you in 25, 27 years, You have demand here. That's why others are opening malls and supermarkets here. Agribusiness, feed the 200 million Nigerians now, but you better prepare for the 400 million in 2050. Downstream petrochemicals, energy, LPG. By the way, I know for sure, because I used to lobby here back in 2016 to help Nigerian women not cook in smoke, to say don't burn that gas, create an LPG market. And some experts told me that's at least a $5 billion market a year. Yeah, you have the raw material. The rest of us don't. Yeah? So public policy. So last slide, and I'll leave you. To do all of that, you need to do this. Most of my presentations in Africa, this is where I end. You need to align 4 Ps. Politics matters. When you have the wrong politicians and bad politicians, they will make bad policies. This is why I say to you young people, get active and get involved in politics. Otherwise, somebody else will lead you. The right politicians, public officers will create the right public policy. Pricing matters. Nothing is for free. Everything has a cost. There has to be trade-off. Good leaders will make good choices, even if it's for the future, and they will not get immediate praise, but they will do it for posterity. And of course, what Bismarck really would like, public-private partnership. The money is in the private sector. Nigeria, you have a lot to be proud of. A lot of things. That's why we admire you. But you are not there yet. You are not where you're supposed to be. Fortunately, you have the right people. You have some very rich Nigerians who are innovating. I meet them in the World Economic Forum, other places. People ask them for ideas. Your leadership should ask the business people, how do we make Nigeria great again? And of course, you, the youth, should have that answer. It is you, the young people, who will make Nigeria great, and everybody will benefit in Africa. Thank you very much.
Wow. Wow. Now I know that we are angry. All those who are around my age and below, aren't we annoyed? Good. And I love the fact that he has fired that annoyance in us. Please, let's give him another round of applause. But not only has he done that, seated here is a panel that will further expatiate on what he has said. But before I introduce that panel, let me quickly say that Otuba Olawale Cole, he's a former president of the Alumni, he's in the house. Please give me a round of applause. You're welcome, sir. Let me also say that the first vice president, Dr. Chifasi Yusuf, is also in the house. You're welcome, sir. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I will soon cede this microphone to Dr. Waheed Olagunju, former MD, Bank of Industry, to moderate the discussions. Please give him a round of applause. He's already seated there. The discussants. Thank you. The Registrar of University of Lagos and Secretary to Council of University of Lagos is in the house, Oladejo Aziz Esquire. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. The discussant, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, she's a senior special assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, which we have heard. Not only that, she's a former deputy governor, Lagos State. Please welcome with me. She's already seated, Dr. Adejoke Orelope Adefulure. Thank you. When I open the papers, I wonder the kind of blood that runs in this man with the way he writes. Finally, I met him today. He's the Chief Executive Officer, Financial Derivatives Company Limited, and is a member of the Economic Advisory Council, Mr. Bismarck Rewane. It will have been Dr. Mrs. Ndidi Nnoli Edozian, but she's unavoidably absent, but she has sent to represent her. Mrs. Bekeme Masade Olowola. She's the Chief Executive, CSR in Action, Board Member, Global Reporting Initiative. Please give her a round of applause. And they will discuss this topic in details. I'm going to hand over to Dr. Wahid Olagunju. Please give me a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Madam. Once again, can we please give Dr. Yemkela another round of applause? He has not disappointed the alumni of the University of Lagos. He was imported to come here and inspire young Nigerians. That was why he agreed to change his schedule to come to the University of Lagos. So I hope you will not disappoint him when he's 80 years old or 90 years old and he will be reading good things about Nigeria. It will be that it was when he came to the University of Lagos during our golden anniversary that he inspired you, and you are beginning to do great things. Well, from all indications, government alone cannot develop any society. There are facilitators of development, but governments have important roles to play at the national and sub-national level. For instance, setting up the enabling environment, coming up with appropriate legislation and incentives that would motivate the private sector. The private sector are also active players in the development process, as well as community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, and indeed our international development partners. That informed the panel that we decided to constitute. Mrs. Adefulure cuts across national and subnational. Having been Deputy Governor of Lagos State, so she operated at subnational level. Now, she's Senior Special Assistant to the President on the SDGs. She's now operating at the national level. So she'll be speaking from the government perspective. The private sector has an important role to play. That's why Bismarck Rewane is here. He started as a banker, but is now one of Nigeria's foremost economists. And of course, that's why he's a member of the President's Economic Advisory Council. And of course, our social entrepreneur is also here to let us know what the private sector can do, NGOs can do, and community-based organizations. And Dr. Yemkela will also from time to time respond to issues. But it's only fair that we start with our Excellency, Madam Adejoke Adefulure. It's your responsibility. Do you have a microphone with you? If you don't, I'll give you this microphone so you can start off.
Thank you so much. Very distinguished personalities, my dear brothers and sisters, and of course, the great Akokites. The great Akokites. The greatest and the greatest Akokites. Greatest Bogo. Greatest Gbagba. I'm sure at the end of this discussion, we will prove that the University of Lagos is the father of all university. Because we are being challenged to take responsibilities. The responsibility today, when our brother, because he said he was here in 2003, by the time he comes again, we will see a lot of difference through you, and because government is about you. Let me also congratulate the alumni for the 58th anniversary. Long live University of Lagos. The topic that have been discussed, we all know that the successor of Millennium Development Goals is the SDG, which is Sustainable Development Goals. The member states were asked and were commissioned to drive Millennium Development Goal for 15 years from year 2000 to 2015. And because none of the member states achieved SDGs, both developed and developing countries, was why what informed the conceptualization of the SDGs that has 17 goals, 169 indicators, and between 232 and 2044 indicators. It's a very big and very ambitious goal to be driven by government, the private sector, academia, civil society, donor partners, and everybody, women organization, youth organization, sub-national government, and all of us. Everybody, individually and collectively, we have a role to play. To join hands with the government to ensure that we build a world and a future that will sustain us. Having listened to the lead presenter, I know quite sure that in 2015, when the leaders met again at the United Nations General Assembly, 25th of September 2015, to review and adopt the SDGs, they were in the heart of SDG was the private sector. Because under the MDG, there was no discussion about private sector, it was just mentioned. And the world believed that with private sector, with the expertise, with the resource mobilization, with their tenacity, they can help the public sector working together to achieve SDGs. And on that note, we started early as a government by my appointment and my office. And of course, within a quarter of the year, that is 2016 March, the institutional network, framework, action plans are set up. We set up the institutional framework and action plan on how to drive SDG in Nigeria. Along the line, 6 months after, we worked by setting up the private sector advisory group on SDGs. The donor partnership forum was set up. The Presidential Council on SDG was set up same year in 2016. All of these sectoral institutions were set up to work with the private, to work with the public sector to see how we can work together in terms of mobilization of resources, mapping of SDGs on the prioritized goals. Because member states were allowed to prioritize SDG according to their priorities. So it does not compulsory. It does not compulsion as to do 17 goals. If 10 goals is your priorities, set a goal for 10 goals so that we can work on that. And the fact that one goal has relationship with another goal, say for example, goal 1, that is no poverty, and goal 2, no hunger. I'm sure that if you don't have poverty, you will not be hungry. So there is correlation between a goal, one goal and the other. And if you don't have poverty, definitely you have good health, which is goal 3. And of course, if you don't have poverty themselves, you will send your children to school, which is good 4. So they have correlation to each other, but they then made it ambitious so that the goals can be achieved and can be taken more seriously for the member states to achieve. We put all this structure in place, and we believe that academia too, which is what we are talking about here, has a role to play. I believe that with all these sectoral policies of government that were put in place, we are also working on the subnational government, because it's not a thing that the government of Lagos will say, oh, I'm going to do my own. Governor Ogun will have another one. There must be integration of SDG into policy, plan, and program of every government, both at the national, at the MDS level, then at the subnational level, even to the local government. Because after all, at the state level, that's where we have problems. In Lagos State, we have people, you know, there is a policy level at the federal. We don't have people at the federal, because even the FCT, which is Federal Capital Territory, they have municipal government. So all those subnational governments are to mainstream the SDG into their plans, policies, programs, so that all of us together as a company, working with the private sector, we will achieve SDGs. And I can say that these policies have been institutionalized, and the governments are now knowing, with the last discussion we have at the General Assembly, that they are ready to integrate, to domesticate, to customize SDG into their plans. So that we have been doing some same thing at the different level of government, and that is the only way we can quickly achieve SDG in Nigeria. For example, what is going on, integration also part of it. Southwest integrate together, and other geopolitical zones working together and ensure that everything is doing together to take our people out of poverty, to liberate them from ignorance, and of course, to ensure that policy of education is also aligned to be able to get all our children out of school, back in school. The government is to make the policy, and you listen to the Minister for Education, the policy that they adopted to be mainstream to the state government at the subnational level to get all the children back in school. I agree also with the presenter that, of course, we need the young people to be very innovative. Innovation and technology research and development is very key in what we are talking about. We have here, for example, engineering course, electrical engineering, civil engineering, structural engineering, and all of that. We have to come with something unique so that we can work together with government. Government alone is not sustainable development. All of us, individually, we can form a group, a cluster, who can develop and innovate something that government can invest in to promote for Nigeria, for Nigerian people. So we have to come together to know that it is for our own benefit. It is for the people of Nigeria, for all of us to be prosperous, to be sustained. And of course, it is very important for us to also know that the SDG that we are talking about has come in 17 goals with 3 dimensions: social development, economic development, climate change, and partnership, which is the private sector. And it's for the people of Nigeria, it's for the peace of Nigeria, it's for the prosperity of Nigeria, it's for partnership, and for the planet at large. So, as we speak now, Nigeria has developed an ISDG model for the integration of the subnational government that will drive the SDG. It was launched at the General Assembly about a month ago and I think that Nigeria is the first country to develop that stimulator. That stimulation is for Nigerian government and for the subnational government up to the local government. And as we launch the model, we have many African countries that has approached us to study the model and adopt the model from us. So as we go forward, we need support of everybody: the students, the academia, the lecturers too, must come up with innovative way to support our young people. They need to support our young people to be innovative and to be creative. And if there is need for us to have the Science and Development Fund launched for us to be creative and be more innovative in thinking, I think that will help Nigeria. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Bismarck, could we please have your general reactions and comments on Dr. Yumkela's presentation before we come to specific areas? Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to be here in the audience of Lagos University, one of the greatest universities of our time. I didn't have the fortune of attending the University of Lagos, but I went to another school not far away from here, Ibadan. So, but the beauty is that the young shall grow. So we've accepted the fact that University of Lagos has now matured. Okay. Apologies. Okay. Professor Kande Yunkela has told us what we already know, and he has emphasized what we know. He has also reiterated what we know, but what you know is different from what you believe in. And like they say, the ears are for listening, the brain is for understanding, and the mind is for implementing. So what we face today is well documented. And the truth is that there is a definition for those who do the same thing and expect different results. There are institutions for such people. So when you have a situation where we've been talking about this same thing from 1960 to 65, 66, Civil War, post-Civil War, military government, post-military government, offsprings of the military government, civilian government, pseudo-civilian government, pseudo-democracy, and we come up with the same results. We end up with the same results, then something is wrong. It was Einstein who clearly said that if you continue doing the same thing and expect a different result, there are institutions for such people. Now, we have a situation where, critically, there is an excess supply of intellectual dishonesty in Nigeria. So I listened to the prof, and he kept on emphasizing the same things, which we all know. They've been documented. The problems of Nigeria are well documented. The question is, why is it that we keep on doing the same thing and expect a different result? Why is it that in spite of all that we have done, we seem to be walking our way down the ladder of success? So, that if you watch an old movie in those days called Kramer versus Kramer, say, why are you walking yourself down the ladder of success? Why is this university, Ibadan University, Nsukka University, Benin, Ahmadu Bello, why are their standards falling? Because the institutions have become weak, and again, we have excess supply of intellectual dishonesty. We just don't want to tell the truth. Or even when we hear the truth, we want to believe something else. So we are in, what I call visual, mental hallucination, where we don't want to hear the truth, but we expect different outcomes. Now, we had Y2K many years ago. We had MDGs, we have SDGs. But if you look at the trajectory of our performance as an economy, right, we've been declining. The broad goals of economics is that this generation must enjoy a standard of living higher than the previous generation. And Professor Bayode, God bless him, right, told us that at the end of the planning process, the quality of life of the people should be better than the quality of life before you. You should live a better life than your father, and your father should have lived a better life than your grandfather. But if you ask yourself today, anytime the word nostalgia is used, it's evidence of the fact that the past is better than the present. And Nigerians live and thrive in nostalgia. Do you know that 10 years ago we were doing this? Do you know that? But that's what it is, because you have not invested in where you're going. Professor Wokoya was the one that drew up the plan, the education plan for Western Nigeria, and committed 40% of the resources of Western Nigeria at that time to education. At the same time, the Eastern Nigeria committed about 20%, and not so well for the other part of Nigeria. However, the result is that 50, 60 years later, you can see the difference, the cumulative investment in manpower. Now, we've had a situation, and Prof was talking about the infrastructure, the growth. If you do not achieve growth of, say, 7 to 10%, then you're actually working your way down the ladder of success. And how do you go about this? The philosophy of, it said politics, policy, pricing, and the key thing is, what type of economic policy do you want to adopt? Do you want to adopt a centrally controlled Marxist approach where everything is controlled by the government? And mind you, the federal government of Nigeria is only 50% of the government activity. The rest are states and local government. And if you combine the federal and state government activity together, they don't come to more than 10% of total GDP. So, ab initio, if you depend on government investment and activity as a percentage of total GDP, you are going nowhere. So it leaves you with the other factor, which is investment and consumption. Since the consumption is dependent on oil wealth, what we call a natural wealth economy, where all we do is to share and come back again and share again without producing, then it's only a question of time when that extractive base will decline and will be where we didn't want to be. Okay, so we now go to the only thing that would drive this economy is private sector investment. If you have an investment-led strategy, it will pull along all the other sectors. So, and I'm not saying that leave the markets to determine all your variables, but if you have that combination, what we call the mixed economic model, and this is what the president in his wisdom said, okay, I'll bring this 8 economists to tell me what I know and reiterate what I know, and then we implement what we do know, but maybe we do it differently from how it has been done in the past. Maybe we'll succeed. But if you don't try, then you're guaranteed to fail. So that's the issue. That how do we carry out this transition from a natural wealth economy to a produced wealth economy? How do we invest on all of these things? The politics, the policy, the pricing, and the PPP. How do we go about it? We know the problems already, and quite frankly, Nigerians are sick and tired of telling them the problems and making excuses why you don't succeed. Nobody's interested. There's no difference between an excuse and a reason. Period. What you want is succeed in 1 or 2. Instead of having 50 uncompleted projects, complete 2 or 3 and let people see it. So the thrust I see going forward is to prioritize on the things that we must do and know the things that we must not do. And I always refer to Farid Zakaria's simple 3 steps. Stop doing the dumb things. First, there are too many dumb things being done. 2, start doing some smart things and then modernize those things. You can't have a country where everything is stranded. Stranded gas, stranded oil, stranded power. You know, you have airports, 28 airports, in a country that needs roads. You have cars without roads. You have rail tracks without trains. Come on. What is this? That is what we call the negative investment multiplier. Because to think that investment must always have a positive multiplier in economics is a fallacy. There is no static situation. You must move either forward or backwards. So what has happened essentially over the years is that we're moving relatively backward. He said, you have to run faster in order to stand still. That's what Keynes said, and that is the truth. That it is time for 1, intellectual honesty. 2, the leadership must Leadership is the followership, not the leadership of the leadership. I think that's important. And finally, you must know that the demand for good governance, which is the social media and the young people, once you increase the demand for good governance, people may not like it because they say it's opposition, it's that and all that. That's all nonsense. The truth is that an increase in the demand for good governance will be followed by the supply of good governance. If you don't demand it, you don't get it. And you must demand it. I'm not saying be violent about it. You must consistently demand it, because the people in the end get the leadership they deserve. If after 100 years of existence, corporate existence of this country, we are where we are, it's because maybe we did something wrong 2 centuries ago, and we are being punished with the kind of outcomes that we have. But it's time to change it. The past is gone and gone forever. What's important is the steps to make sure that we can make this transition from a natural wealth economy where we believe in sharing and gasping every month to go for FAC, or now produce so that we can produce things and do what was achieved in this country with cocoa, cotton, groundnut, palm oil, and others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bismarck, Demeke, can we have your initial comments, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Bekeme Masade Olola, and I'm very honored to be here. My fellow Unilag, Greater Cockites. Okay, so I think I'm the most qualified to be here because I didn't hear any other person say that they actually went here. Did she say that? Okay, if you say so. Okay, so I'm a social scientist, and I'm not going to compete with Mr. Riwani, who was quoted throughout when the keynote speaker was speaking and reminding us all of all that he's done in this space. So I like telling human stories because I feel like the SDGs are about humans, okay? I think that there are all sorts of things that happen or that are planned for that never actually come to pass because of the human beings that don't let them happen. You gave some fantastic examples of different countries of the world who committed to doing certain things that never quite happened. And I mean, if I look at the SDGs and what the SDGs aim to attain, including social justice, including peace, biodiversity, reducing poverty and all of that. If we need to tackle that by 2030 in Nigeria, then I think that there needs to be a shift in the way that we think. I think that there are hard and soft approaches to dealing with our problems. So with the hard, I mean like technical, legal approaches. And for instance, we have the senior special assistant to the SDGs here. We have the Senate and House committees on SDGs. We have interministerial committees on SDGs. And I really don't know how much has changed though, even though I have to give credit to Princess Adifulire. Since she came into office, I've seen her making the moves, going around, meeting with different stakeholders. I haven't seen, that as much before because, and then for us, let me deal with the soft. So, and then for the soft, we will then look at culture. Nigeria. I went to Unilag, and everybody, I'm sure, at some point in Unilag must have heard, dress the way you wish to be addressed. That was the dreaded thing. If you're going there, send it. You think about, you look at yourself first, and you look at your skirt. If you're a lady, and you say, will they address me the way I wish to be addressed? And then if you don't think that you'll be addressed the way you wish to be addressed, you move away, right? You go back. And I think that that's where we are at now in Nigeria. We have so many intelligent people, but we don't seem to dress ourselves figuratively the way we wish to be addressed. And that's something that needs to change. And it's not just about our leadership. We know that we have a challenge with leadership, but I think it was mentioned earlier when it was said that government cannot do everything. And we have people, and that's why we as an organization, we focus on people, we focus on value system reorientation, because our leaders are people. Our leaders are our brothers, fathers, sisters. We are leaders in our own way, in our various capacities. We have opportunity to be leaders. And what do we do with that opportunity, because it's all of these things that we do that would lead to us achieving the goals. For instance, if you check social media now, there is a proliferation of stories around Yahoo and Yahoo Plus boys, isn't it? It's true. It has increased. Why? Because it seems like a lot of people are not focusing on building, but want to achieve very quickly. And even the entertainment guys spoke about this as well. You know, you want to just hammer now, literally. And it doesn't always happen like that. And I feel like if we have that approach, then, you know, it doesn't really work. Or if we look at the case of the Niger Delta, I'm conversant with the Niger Delta because I work in the extractive space, pursuing advocacy. We just recently developed the nation's first community engagement standards, a tool for businesses to, you know, to help businesses deal with communities. And you hear that there is peace, there is conflict in the Niger Delta. But then you hear about the huge sums, the trillions of dollars that pass through the Niger Delta. And then you hear about, I mean, every research that comes out tells you, oh, there needs to be a body, an agency managing the funds that come from the Niger Delta so that it reaches the people and all of that. And then you hear about the NDDC and 4,000 projects which were not executed. And then you wonder, who are these people? How can we have all of these nice policies? I know that under the PSAG and the Office of Princess Adefiliere, we've come up with something called the Integrated SDGs. But how do we achieve these SDGs? Because we have different sectors that feed into our achievement of the SDGs. If these different sectors don't work together, nothing is going to happen. Nothing would actually change. I also think that we need to look at collaboration a lot more. I feel like there's an independence, there's a certain fractioned way of working in the country. So you have this body doing that, you have that body doing that, and it doesn't all come together. I'm glad that we have a set of indicators, but I worry about measurement. How many people know how far we've gone on the SDGs? I see someone shaking her head like, I'm thinking. Okay, so again, because that's where I come from in terms of performance. So yes, we have these SDGs. Yes, we plan towards this. But how have we integrated all of these nice plans into our everyday lives? And how are we as a people working to make that happen? Again, I want us to go back. It's, you know, we're typically happy when we blame government. It's very easy. But then when you hear that the government put a stop to importation of rice so that local content can grow, and then you hear that people started rebagging the local rice into foreign bags, what then do you expect? What can government do? What can government do? And so we need to also, you know, continuously push that narrative that, you know, we need to fight this as a collective. It is not just about one person. It's not just about policy. It's about changing the way we think. It's about inclusion. And I cannot overemphasize the role that business has to play in this. Oftentimes you hear various committees being set up and you wonder, how did they get together, those people who were there? How? Or if it's business, it doesn't have to be big business. There's smaller businesses that are doing wonderful things. How about getting them on board many of these committees that are, you know, constantly formed? I was very excited when, I think it was earlier this year, a young woman that I know, she's actually my age, started the first gold refinery in West Africa. And it was as a result of the government's ERGP lab. And what I'm trying to say here is that more of those conversations, more of those opportunities to engage, you know, legitimate businesses, viable businesses are required. And inclusion doesn't stop with just business and the different government agencies. It also looks at the matter of women, and it looks at the matter of youth. Okay? When I walked in here, people were looking at me like, what is she going to the front to do? And even though I'm excited once again to be the youngest in the panel, it gets lonely at the top. Because we need younger people. I'm getting older. I don't look it, I know. But we need young people all the time because young people are innovative, right? Don't you agree? Young people are innovative, young people have ideas, young people are thinking, young people are coming up with solutions. And I feel like this is the time, if we do really need to want to achieve the SDGs, then we need to democratize the process. We need to make it accessible. It doesn't need to be that complicated. So, and I think the final point I would make is around communication, awareness, and training. I know that there's a lot of work happening under the radar, but I also know that there needs to be an understanding. So if we want people to be involved, and now I'm talking to government representatives here, if we really want people to be involved in driving the SDGs, then they need to have an understanding of what we're trying to do. Okay, and if they don't have an understanding, then they can't contribute to it. They cannot contribute towards it. And I think that that's where communication comes in. That's where communication comes in. That's where, people are told exactly what it is, are not assumed to be too dumb or too thick to get the big picture. So I think that this can also be achieved when we look at how the different agencies can work can make this happen. I think about the NDC, for instance, the nationally determined contributions of the Paris Agreement. And I think about the ISDGs. And I wonder, how do these two come together? It's a challenge that I think that we need to look at. And if I finalize this on what I had talked about earlier in terms of young people, conversations like this should not happen once in a while. It should not happen once in a while. We should have awareness fora. I mean, there's no harm in having a business and SDGs program on channels. There's no harm in continuously talking about it so that young people have people that they aspire to. They have role models that they look up to. And then these role models also have a responsibility to become better people, because the future of the country and achievement of whatever sustainability drive we aim for is hinged on the development of our young. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bekeme. Now we'll go to specific issues. What is clear is that, putting it quantitatively, Nigeria's GDP is about $400 billion US, and all the government's budgets are less than 10% of this. Let's put it at about $35 billion US. So clearly, we cannot operate this economy with a $35 billion private government budget. So what we need to do to have our GDP quadrupled to about 1.6 trillion by 2030 to take care of increasing population is to grow the private sector. And that probably explains why in crafting the SDGs, more roles were assigned to the private sector, unlike the MDGs that had less emphasis on private sector and more of government. So like Bismarck said, how do we evolve an investment-driven economy? We need more investments, domestic and foreign. I'll take our minds back to perhaps in the mid-80s, where we had about 300,000 telephone lines. According to the ITU at that time, the International Telecommunications Union, the prescription, and also under the Lagos Plan of Action that was adopted in 1980, was that by year 2000, the ratio of telephone lines should be 1 to 100, which meant that Nigeria needed just 1 million telephone lines to achieve this target. But at that time, we didn't have the resources as a country. The government didn't have the funds to provide the additional 700,000 telephone lines. Because at that time, we're heavily indebted. And oil price was going for about maybe $11 per barrel. But then, in the early 2000s, sequel to the deregulation of the telecom sector, there was increased participation by the private sector. And we are all witness to what has happened in the last 18 years. We've had massive increase from about 400,000 telephone lines to more than 100. 100 million in less than 20 years. The revolution in Nigeria's telecom sector has been the most rapid in the world, but nobody is saying anything about this because the Western media only like to report the negative narrations. But the achievements in Nigeria has been unprecedented. Same thing with cement. We used to import cement. Government established cement plants to try to bridge the gap, but that didn't happen until again 2002, when the government came up with the cement policy and increased private sector participation. And between 2002 and 2012, many Nigerian entrepreneurs leveraged the government policy and were able to attract foreign capital into the sector, such that today we have become net exporters of cement. So what we need to do is to replicate what we did in cement, what we did in telecoms, and what we're about to do in the petroleum sector now. Because by the time the Dangote refinery is completed in 2 years from now, we'll become net exporters of petroleum products. And it's not Nigerian capital that is being used exclusively. We've had a lot of foreign capital injected into this sector. Look at the banking sector too. The transformation has been quite phenomenal. So what is clear is that if we put our minds to something as Nigerians, we can achieve it. So the essence of this forum, like she pointed out, is to increase awareness about the SDGs. And the theme of our 50th anniversary celebration is driving Nigeria's sustainable development agenda. And for most of us in the Alumni Association, with all humility, like Kande Yumkela said, when we were growing up, by the way, I attended the University of Lagos. I was here. My first degree and my second degree. Right? I mean, we had the best of times. Femi Oterola's mother, we used to call her Madam Efficiency. She was in charge of our catering department. And she looked after us like our mothers would back home. We had fun. It was good. We don't like what you are going through now. But we want your children to enjoy a better life than you are enjoying now. So we are giving back to society. That's why we decided to come up with this forum to discuss the SDGs. So I'll go back to the panelists. How can we increase the private sector's participation in the Nigerian economy? Bismarck.
I think that is the most pertinent question. How are you going to increase private sector participation? First and foremost, the private sector, any investor for that matter, is taking a risk. And he's taking a risk, he's parting with his money, borrowing money, pledging his assets as collateral to take a risk. There's no guarantee that he will succeed. When he's making this decision, he should be encouraged to make such decisions, not discouraged with multiplicity of taxes, harassment, shakedowns, and all of that. So what has happened is that investors do not judge you by what you say, they judge you by what you do. If you are seen harassing other investors, nobody will bring their money here. So you have to start the philosophy that investment is as a result of corruption, that investment and success is because it's a zero-sum game. You've stolen the money from the consumers. You've overpriced them. You've done this and all of that. I think that we have to get away from that mentality, because for every successful investor, there are probably 50 that didn't succeed and failed. So those that succeed need to be encouraged and incentivized to start with. 2, you will not invest in any business if you are not allowed to determine your price. So if you regulate the price and say this is the price, you cannot charge more than this, tomorrow you have no control over the costs. If my costs exceed, my marginal cost exceeds my marginal revenue, I will not produce. So we've got to accept philosophically in the first place that a partner there's mutual trust. The conspiracy theory, you made a comment just now about the Western media like to see the negative. I think to some extent may be right, but I think the Nigerian policymakers and the Nigerian investment community, the Nigerian public, have been fed with this conspiracy theory, neo-colonial, that there's this group of people trying to come and steal your resources. The truth is that you have resources, but those resources have become a declining function of time because they have become obsolete anyway. So if you didn't use it and used it to improve and elevate your own quality of life, then after a while, it'll be nothing. You said there was a time when we put out the bid for Nitel. The non-refundable deposit of Nitel, First Bank and all the others, was $182 million. They lost the bid. Some people got fired in First Bank because of that. Now, 20 years later, we sold whatever was left of Nitel for less than half of the non-refundable deposit because it had become obsolete. So there's a time for everything. The time to encourage investors to come in was yesterday. The time to do everything to motivate them and not harass them was yesterday. The time to believe that an investment-led strategy combined with a government-led strategy is what is going to deliver growth. And I'm talking about quantum leap growth, not mild growth. We were growing at 7%, 6-7% 20, 30 years ago. Now we are lucky to edge out 2% when our population is 2.8 or 2.9% growth. So this is not going to do. This is a race to the bottom if we don't do something about bringing investors. And investors are not foreign investors, mind you. Investors are both domestic and international investors. All that the investor wants is a guaranteed or a decent return on investment, and that he can enforce his rights in case there's a dispute. I think that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Now we have less than 10 minutes to go. Madam, can we have your remarks, please?
Well, I will have to say that the policy of government is focused towards the foreign and domestic investment. Part of the policy is the ERGP, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan of the federal government, embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, to allow foreign local investment to grow, the government has have a very flexible policy to guarantee their investment and bring also foreign investors. Part of it is the 24 hours registration policy, that in 24 hours you register your business, especially the young entrepreneur. Of course, for the foreign investors, they can get visa on arrival. You don't need to go and get your visa before you come to Nigeria to look at it. You can get visa on arrival. They also guarantee and, of course, encourage foreign investment in Nigeria. I think with all of this, and of course for us to understand how the private sector can participate in achievement of SDGs. I think investment directly by private sector will contribute to the achievement of SDG. Your business, you can develop your business here and you are contributing to the achievement of SDG. Also, you can support government coming together of private sector, working together with public sector to put infrastructure in place. And part of what we are doing, which is very unique, is mobilization of the private sector in Nigeria and those the multinational coming to help, to support government in getting some of our children back in school, fixing our health sectors, and even building the health sector for themselves for business. So there are a lot of ways in which private sector can work with government for us to achieve SDGs, directly, indirectly, and with collaboration with the public sector. So what I would want us to take home here is that we need innovation. We need to innovate new ideas, new concepts to support government. The government will be able to support you if you come with one. So take it now that it's not about government alone, it's about all of us. So whatever we can do ourselves to support government, and government can encourage you, it's something, because our investment today is for tomorrow. What we have lost over the years can be regained if we start today. So I want us to start today. New thinking, new innovation, new ideas, I know Nigerians are very smart. They are very intelligent. And I know that together, working with government and contributing your own quota as individual, as a group, as a university will help us achieve SDG. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Well, today the World Bank just released its new ranking in the ease of doing business. Nigeria moved up by 50 positions. We used to be 146. If you remember, we moved 146 by improving about 20 positions, or 24 positions moving up. So we are now ranked about 131 in the world out of 190, moving from 146, which means that the business environment is improving not only at the national level, but even at the sub-national level. Like Dr. Jumoke Oduwole said, who is also an alumni of this university, that the state governments are actively involved. This is the feedback the World Bank got from entrepreneurs trying to do or doing business in those states, which goes back to what Ms. Adefulere was saying, that is not only for government alone. All hands must be on deck. Participatory approach is the best development process. And on that note, community-based NGOs and other Nigerians, how can they work with the private sector, formal private sector in this case, because he was talking about the informal private sector, and the public sector, in ensuring that we have a better life for Nigerians 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line?
Thank you very much. The role of community organizations and civil society organizations is primarily advocacy, okay? And so I straddle that space. So I work business, and then we also have a non-profit. And, you know, I mentioned one of the things that we do, for instance. We know that the Ministry of Petroleum Resources and the federal government have a focus of bringing peace to extractive industry, to the extractive industries. And one way to do that is, beyond policy, we brought it down to say, how can we make the people happier in order that we reduce conflict? How can we make the people happier in order that we reduce the destruction of infrastructure? How can we make the people happier in order that there is growth? Because when you look at that space, as mature as it is, there has not been a lot of improvement. And I think that this is something that, you know, the non-profit and civil society organizations that are currently pushing hard. And they would push hard for businesses to actually understand their role in driving development, and they would push hard for people to be giving a voice, whether business, whether committee persons, and all of that. And they'll push for educational reforms, for instance, because young people are working too hard to educate themselves. So lots of the young people are educating themselves on the internet rather than getting quality education at school. And unfortunately, I don't think that Unilag is one of those schools who's not giving quality education. So well done to the team at Unilag. So basically, I would say that to round up, because there's not a lot of time, as Antonio Guterres, the 9th Secretary General of the UN, said, there is no plan B, because we do not have a planet B. The time to work is now, and we need to focus on making Nigeria great again.
Thank you very much. The grandfather of a Nigerian, Dr. Yumkele, can we have your last shots, please?
Nigerians don't have to go far to know that they can do it. Ethiopia, growing at 8-9%. Cote d'Ivoire next door, why not you? Right now, Nigeria has between 23 to 30 technology hubs. What the government should be thinking now, if you did so well in the digital mobile revolution, make now a target that instead of 23 to 30 tech hubs, in another 5 years, you want to do 200. Then you engage the youth. It is important. I believe it is imperative. It is imperative for Nigeria, when you look at your demographics, that government has to have a clear strategy of engaging the youth. If 50% of your population is going to be below 30, you either make them the skilled workforce of Africa and the world, or you are waiting for a major crisis. This is true across Africa. We need to create lots of jobs, but let us make the young people entrepreneurs. This is why I support your private philanthropists, Tony Elumelu, Aliko Dangote, and others, who are investing in entrepreneurship now for the youth. We need to do that. And when you talked about NGO engagement, tap into your private philanthropy. I see what private philanthropy is doing in Asia, in trying to do the things governments cannot do. Engage folks like those to be able to invest in institution building, in skills development, and investing in the youth to experiment. Bismarck said something about Einstein. You got to try and try, but somebody has to finance that stage in which you are experimenting. That's where government capital comes in. That's where also private philanthropy will come in. So again, the youth, this forum is really about you. If we cannot achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, you'll be in trouble. Learn more about them, engage, and stand up and be counted. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Just before we round up, yesterday, the federal government changed the name of the Ministry of Communications to Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy, which shows that the government is placing a lot of emphasis on digitalizing our operations, and that's where you play. So the ball is in your court. And it's not that we conclude this interactive session. Thank you very much, Dr. Yumkela, for coming to Nigeria. I want to thank the panelists for your various contributions, and thanks for the audience. Thank you very much.
Please, round of applause for our panelists once more. Round of applause for them, please. Please, we have just about 5 minutes left here. We'll be out of this place. Please, may I respectfully call upon the former governor of Lagos State, Mrs. Sarah Shoson, to please. Yes. Former Deputy Governor, please. Former Deputy Governor, please. Princess, please. Princess Sarah Choson, you are welcome, ma'am. Please, you will kindly do us some presentations here today to thank and appreciate our panelists. Please, round of applause for her, please. And in no...
Start going. Students, can you please sit in? Please, 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 just allow us. Am I being?
Thank you, ma. Eshema.
Teacher Nimio.
Yes. In no particular order, Dr. Kandel Yunkela, please.
The second one, representative of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Family. Professor Family, subject.
Now to Mr. Bismarck Rewani.
Okay, the mic. Okay. The light is, yes. On behalf of the University of Lagos Alumni Association, we're giving this recognition award to Mr. Bismarck Rewani, that all of us, I listen to him always, and I think he should do. Thank you very much for contributing to today's success. God bless you.
Now to Mrs. Bekeme Masade Oluowola.
Bekeme, I want to reassure you that they admired you when you were coming in as one of the youngest one. And we've been blessed. So on behalf of the alumni, we present this to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma. Thank you, Princess.
And of course,
I now call on the representative. Ma, I don't want you to present.
Okay. And she happens to be my sister.
Yes, you will support. Please, I now call on the representative of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos, who has been unavoidably absent. He is also representing himself in his own capacity, and that is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics and Research, Professor Jide Familoni. Wale Familoni, please. You're welcome, sir. You do the presentation, sir. To Mrs. Adejoke Orilope Adefudure.
On behalf of University of Lagos Alumni Association, recognition award presented to Mrs. Adejoke Orilope Adefudure, being a discussant at this association Golden Jubilee lecture. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm privileged to be among the two deputy. Maybe I'll soon be a governor. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Yunkela, maybe you should be the way to sir. The star attraction. See.
Yes.
Brought up, I'll be here then.
Yeah, thank you. The panelists may still take their seats. Please, just before we round up, I'd like to recognize the organizers of this program. They've done a great job. Please, round of applause for them. The chairman of the committee is no other person than Mr. Tope Smart, the GMD, NEM Insurance PLC. Mr. Tope Smart, please come on stage. He is also the chairman of Nigerian Insurance Association and the vice president of African Insurance Association. Mr. Tope Smart, you are welcome. Please on stage. The vice chair is Mrs. Sarah, the princess again. Shoson, you are welcome, ma'am. Dr. Wahid Olagunju, also a member of the committee, the former MD, Bank of Industry. Thank you, sir. Mr. N.M. Ufot, amen, please. Dr. Aaron Akinloye, the National Secretary. Dr. Adeoti Lukman, the Unilag Alumni Association Chair for Lagos. Mrs. Regina Chris Ogbodo, she is the National PRO. Dr. Lawal Are, Mr. Oluwarotimi Shodimu Esquire. Where's my brother? Please come on stage. I'm sure he's wearing a bow tie like me somewhere here. And last but not the least, Ms. Barrister Tunde Fadahunse. Please kindly come on stage for a good photograph with the panelists, please. Please, the Vice Chancellor, she will wait behind. Please, just after this, the vote of thanks, but before then, my Vice Chancellor cannot be here and not give some remarks. I will, by power conferred upon me by this microphone, I will call on the Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos. Please, round of applause for him. He will give a bit remarks.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the time is far spent, and I'm just going to congratulate the alumni. I want to congratulate ourselves for this wonderful program, which is continuing. And I pray that 55, 60, all of us will be here to come and contribute to the national development that University of Lagos is built and established for. Thank you very much for waiting to this time, and thank the elders of the university for coming. Please